History remembers the facts, but what about the phantoms that refuse to be forgotten? Tonight's guest spent a year inside a house that defied reality, documented every terrifying moment, and still carries the scars. This is not fiction. This happened. Welcome back to The Common Historian, where history meets the supernatural. I'm Jeremy, the Common Historian, and each week we explore the haunting intersections between our past and the paranormal. Tonight, I'm joined by Doug Owen, non-author, paranormal investigator, and founder of Authentic Haunted, to uncover the true story behind the Unholy Silence, a memoir 20 years in the making about a demonic haunting that nearly destroyed his family. So grab your favorite beverage, dim the lights, and prepare to journey into the world where history refuses to stay buried. Welcome, Doug.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
No, not a problem. I'm excited to kind of learn more about your story and a lot of other stuff. So, from what I've read, you tried to write the story for 20 years and said something just kept stopping you almost supernaturally. What finally changed that allowed you to finish it?
It was 20 years in the making. And each time I'd try to write the memoir, the door would slam, or I would see my breath for an instance, or I'd get a phone call with garbled, unnatural voices screaming. I did tuck it away. I tucked it away for 20 years, focused on paying the bills, creating a family, going to work, getting up, medical issues, whatever it is, just life. So it took me a while to revisit the memoirs. And I thought, you know what? I think I can write this. I've got detailed journals, I've got witnesses who can corroborate what I saw. My
Yeah.
mental health is good. I'm not crazy. Maybe it's time to share my story with the world.
Yeah, and I can completely relate. I lived 2 years in a haunted house. Not as I don't think it's as haunted as what I've read about yours. It was most of them were pretty nice. If you
Nice.
would, if they weren't anything, I don't think evil. Maybe a little grumpy, a few of them, but anyway. So the title's The Unholy Silence. Was it like the silence from church, or was there a reason? What was the what's behind the title?
Absolutely. And it can be a little misleading, but in my experience, a lot of the paranormal activity happened in silence. Things that should have been noisy, shaking the house, caused us to cover our ears. A lot of it happened in silence, but it also does refer to the silence when I sought help. And I went to the Catholic Church, and the response was less than forthcoming.
Yeah, and I've heard that with other cases as well, that sometimes the church isn't always convinced that it's demonic or as willing to help as they might probably should be.
Yeah, the interesting thing, I went to the church and I told them, and the deacon said, "Your house has been blessed 3 times." I said, "Yeah, you think there's a reason for that in less than a year?" And he said, and he looked me straight in the eye and he said, "Your house has been blessed, so no evil can exist where God's love is." And I was furious. I was like, "You know what? Screw it. I'm done talking to you. I'm embarrassed about it. Just
Oh,
forget it." And I walked away.
wow, that's crazy. Now you documented everything. You said you had journals. I think you have photos and audio.
Yeah.
As a historian, we document everything. So really respect that instinct. What made you start documenting when most people would have just tried to escape?
So, unfortunately, there was no escape. At the time, I was the victim of a real estate scandal, and it left me financially destitute. I didn't really have anywhere else to go. So, the Catholic Church provided this house as a lease with an option to buy. And financially, I couldn't escape anywhere except maybe to my parents' back bedroom with a family of four. That just wasn't going to work. So,
Yes.
financially, I was recovering. And that was part of the issue of not being able to actually flee. But what I really wanted to get the message across was just really to document that I was not insane. Everybody saw this, and the entities in the house, they didn't give a shit who saw this. I had paranormal investigators come in, and there was only one at the time. Now, keep in mind, This is a time when MySpace was king. So there wasn't thousands of paranormal investigator groups offering to help. There was one, and they came. And on cue, these entities performed like it was a circus act.
Oh my. Yeah, back then it really wasn't something that you actively talked about either. You wouldn't be coming on a podcast and telling your story back then.
Exactly. And I always say there's a society doesn't know how to handle the differently abled. If you're depressed, you hide it. If you're disabled, you minimize it. And if you're haunted, you damn well better keep that to yourself because you've got two possibilities. Either you're insane or you're damned. And so you keep it down on the low. You don't want people to really know about it.
Yeah. It's very similar. When I lived in the haunted house that I did, it was over 20 plus years ago. And I think back then, maybe Ghost Hunters was just starting and Ghost Adventures, some of those, but it was still in the part where you really didn't talk about it too much.
Yeah, I think sightings was a big deal. There's a show you haven't heard about in years, right?
Yeah.
That was on the Fox network back in the day, but that was about it.
Yeah.
So
Maybe, I don't know if that was even that might have been even after that. I'm telling my age, I think.
aren't we both?
So now the house, kind of going into the house and the experiences that you had, can you walk us through what a normal life looked like in the house on a quiet day and then describe what an kind of interrupted day looked like when it was very active?
Yeah, absolutely. So a normal day was us just focused on relationships, struggling with, and eventually my wife had infidelity. She sought companionship outside the marriage at her work. So it was me always trying to hold the family together. Now, keep in mind, I was a newly minted Catholic and I had not yet been baptized, but I was in the process of becoming a Catholic, and it takes about a year. I had crucifixes, I had holy water, I had rosaries. We prayed before every meal, we made the sign of the cross. So a typical day would be obviously work, and my wife at the time, she worked in the evening, so from 2:30 on until midnight she worked. I worked from 4 a.m. until about 1:30 in the afternoon. So we kind of switched gears, and I took care of the children, my two daughters, in the evening times, so she would go to work. So we didn't see a lot of each other, but a typical day would be just doing the grind, coming home from work, setting up meals, prepping, paying bills, just regular life. Now,
Yeah.
disruption. And it happened a lot of the time, it happened during, I'd say 50-50, nighttime and daytime. So one particular day after school, we were downstairs. We were watching television, me and my two daughters. They were having their after school snack. And we hear upstairs, and keep in mind, the house is built in 1952, just a regular ranch style house, two levels, essentially, and hardwood floors and plaster walls. In Idaho, they did a Victorian thing in the 50s where they used the hard plaster and all of that, an interesting design. But we heard the doorknob jiggle. We heard the doors disengage the lock, and then we heard the door slam, and we heard the familiar sound of my wife's heels clicking across the hardwood floor as she walked. Same pattern, same weight, same intensity. My two daughters from downstairs looked at each other. Mom's home, they said exactly in unison. And what came after was jinx, double jinx, triple jinx. All right, Joe, stop it, knock it off. All right, go upstairs. I'm going to grab your plates. I'm going to turn the TV off. Go up and see mom. They ran up the stairs. I followed right after them, and I met them coming back down the stairs with a bewildered look on their face. And they said, Dad, mom's not home. I said, Of course she is. She's in the bathroom. Go upstairs. We're going to go see. So we go upstairs. The door is locked. No car in the driveway. Nobody in the house. So I text my wife real quick. Hey, did you come home, grab something, and run out the door? She said, No, I've been at work for a couple hours. So the children looking to me for an explanation. I said, Obviously, the house was settling. We made a mistake. Let's go back downstairs. So we proceeded back downstairs. And at the head of the stairs was the entrance to the garage. You can get to the garage from the house. So the kids go down before me. They're downstairs. They're going to turn the TV on, watch cartoons, whatever. And I hear a noise from the garage. I open the door and I find my electric sander plugged in and thrown underneath the project car I was working on, smacking the undercarriage of the car. So I went
Oh,
over and plugged it. Now, 1952, I had the circular screw in fuses. I was terrified and paranoid of old electrical wiring causing a fire.
yeah.
I would never leave an appliance in there. Certainly not my sander, and certainly not on the ground anywhere that it could be tossed in there. So that would be a typical disruptive day and one of the more minor occurrences that happened. But we all heard it. We all documented it. We all felt it was her coming home from work. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's weird. Our haunting started with a baby crying. That was
Wow.
the first thing we had.
Okay.
A phantom baby. Yeah.
That could be disruptive. 3 a.m. screaming baby.
Yes.
Wow.
Now, you've said before that it felt like an alternative reality. At what point did you stop trying to find a rational explanation?
The first incident that happened 3 weeks after we moved in, and we were in my daughter's bedroom. Now, the design of the house, the windows upstairs were the old springs on the side of the window. So you lift up the window frame and it makes that boinging noise, right?
Yeah.
So we were up quite a distance. A grown man couldn't look into the kids' bedrooms. They would have had to have gotten the step ladders. So the bottom of the sill was about 8 to 9 feet tall. So you couldn't look in. So I wasn't worried about the kids being upstairs. So my daughter had gotten into trouble at school. We sat her down on her bed. Her back was to the window, and her back was facing the window. She was facing us. And as we were explaining why she was in trouble, we saw from the waist to the top of the head a young teenage boy run by the window, clear as day, strawberry bowl cut hair like the 70s, and a bright canary yellow shirt. My wife said, "What the fuck was that?" 3 steps, I'm at the front door. I'm bounding like Michael Jordan. I'm quick. 3 more steps, I'm at the edge of the house outside at the corner. And I look around, and it's as if the neighborhood was holding its breath. No wind, no birds, no noise, nothing. The boy had run into a fence I had built that was 8 foot tall boards. It was the old oak pieces of wood from a bowling alley that had gone out of business, very sturdy. And on the other side of the fence, of course, was our Rottweiler, who was very protective.
Yeah.
So my wife joined me outside and looked around. She said, "What was that? Where did he go?" I had no explanation. At that point, we simply dismissed it as okay. The boy's athletic. He obviously bounded over the fence and was moving so quickly. The dog was probably asleep and he just was hopping fences in the neighborhood. So that was the first thing there. Now, when I decided that we've got trouble, the window downstairs, and downstairs they had a different window set up. They were the old hinges that folded inward, allow people to get out, but they were still too tall, about 8 or 9 feet tall.
Yeah.
I could not reach them. I had to kneel onto the washing machine to get up to close it. That would open 10 times a day, no matter how I latched it, and it didn't make a difference.
I am.
So, it's the homily. You get everybody through the feeding line, everybody gets their communion, everybody gets their wine, and you're home within an hour and a half tops if he gets long-winded.
Yeah.
30 in the morning, we leave for mass. My neighbor's outside mowing his lawn. He's got a huge lawn. He's got a riding lawnmower. And we had a competition, very friendly with the neighbor. We had a friendly competition to see whose lawn could be the greenest. So he got a jump start that morning, knowing I was going to go to church. So I leave the house. We come back and we pull up. And the first thing I noticed is that the front door is open. I'm like, "Honey, did you leave the front door open?" They said no. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed my garage door was open. And then I looked, and it wasn't just the garage door. It was every door and window in the house was open. I told the kids and my wife, "Stay in the car for a second. I'm going to talk to John next door." So I go talk to my neighbor. I'm like, "John, are you fucking with me? Did you do this?" "No," looking shocked. He's like, "I've been mowing my lawn." I saw you guys leave for church, but there hasn't been anybody driving up the street. There's been nobody around. I said, okay, I'm calling the police. So I called the police, and two deputies from Canyon County Sheriff's Department show up, and they go inside the house, and they come back about 10 minutes later. They say, Mr. Owen, there's nobody in your house. Okay, great, thanks. They look at each other. I said, what? They said, well, your stereo receiver was turned on full blast. Static radio, static, just static, really nasty. Okay, great, thank you. They said, okay, and there's something else. I said, okay, what is it? They said, every mirror in your house is shattered. What? They said, yes, sir. Every mirror in your house is broken. Do you have any enemies? I said, not that I know of. I said, the bastard who screwed us out of the house we were trying to buy, yeah, maybe, but he wouldn't have the balls to come here. No way. And my neighbor's looking out. And I got a dog. No. They said, whoever isn't afraid to escalate, sir, so you probably should get a better security system. And then they looked at each other, waited a moment, got in their car. So I went into the house and investigated. And I looked around, and it wasn't just the vanity mirrors or the mirrors on the door that were shattered. It was the dental mirror in the bathroom drawer. It was the long forgotten shaving mirror in a travel kit tossed behind the toilet
Wow.
paper under the sink. Every makeup compact, whether it was active for my wife to use or one that we had given the kids that was empty to play with, every single mirror in the house was shattered in unison in less than an hour.
Wow. I wonder why they chose to smash all those. That's interesting.
Yeah, some people theorize that it was possibly entities coming through the mirror and broke them as they entered in because
Maybe.
this house was infested, as we later found out. Not just one entity, it was
Maybe.
infested. Absolutely.
Wow. Yeah, yeah, true. That could make sense. Because the mirrors are known to be portals, but yeah.
That took me by I had no hint that this was going to happen, but I've got it documented with the police department. And writing the book, I had to go back and look at this and go, okay, yes, I'm not crazy. I filed an official report. So
Yeah.
obviously, if my neighbor had pulled a prank, you would have been like, okay, don't call the police. Yeah, it was me. You would have come clean rather than
Yeah.
investigate. So, yeah, very interesting. So that was when I really knew that things were out of the normal natural realm. And my arrogance, again, newly minted Catholic, my arrogance told me I can defeat any evil. I've got faith, I've got God on my side. And inexperience, ignorance, and arrogance, a lethal combination when you are dealing with the paranormal.
Yes, and I think that I had read that you, with you being Catholic and it make what try to fight back using your faith, it made it worse. Can you kind of expand upon that?
Absolutely. The house was blessed 3 times, and every time it made it worse. I had a priest who was actually newly anointed priest. He came to dinner and became a friend and that blessed the house. But every time he did, another incident would happen, another activity. For example, my daughter would see a sickly boy crawl out from under her bed at night, crawl into the hallway, vomit, and then disappear. He would sometimes sit in her computer chair and spin it around, or he would throw a ball out from underneath. One night, after a blessing in the house, my daughter had screamed, and I had run up those stairs very quickly. And I burst into her room, protective father. What's happening? She said, there's someone in my closet. Of course, I ripped open the doors ready to fight, and there was no one in the closet. However, the clothing on the hangers were rocking back and forth like a ship at sea, all in unison. Very powerful, whatever this thing was. And my daughter's window continued to open by itself. And that's when I had gone to the church. And when he told me there's no evil, get a shotgun. I got a shotgun, got a Rottweiler. I'm 250 pounds. I'm not afraid of anybody.
Yeah.
Artist, whatever. You're not understanding what I'm saying. So that night, and here is also where it escalated. That night, I had given my daughter a little ceramic Jesus statue. You've seen them in the stores with
Yeah.
the little, just chintzy little cheapy statue. I said, put this on your windowsill. I took my DeWalt drill and I drilled 5-inch sheetrock screws through the sill into the sash. 5 of them lined up. Okay, that window's not opening, hon. Here you go. Put your Jesus statue there. You're going to be safe. I've already blessed the house. I've already slung holy water all over the place. There's a crucifix above every entry and every exit of the doors. Holy water, baptismal fonts, rosaries. It was a monument to Christianity. It was insane. So I go in the kitchen to get a drink of water. My daughter follows. She gets a drink of water. I say, I'm going to tuck you in here. So go ahead and go to bed. So she goes into bed, and I'm probably 20 feet away. It's not very far. From the kitchen, I can see her door. It's not very far. She goes into her bedroom, and I hear the scream. And again, 2 steps, I'm in the doorway of her bedroom. And she's huddled in the corner, biting on her fists like this. And I look at the window, and the Jesus statue is crushed into powder, destroyed completely. And the window is open again. And chunks of wood are attached to the bottom of the screws. It had ripped the window open and destroyed part of the sill. But what it was that was terrifying was that it was completely silent. We heard nothing. And her door was open and we weren't very far away. Hardwood floors, everything echoes. So that was also part of the reason I titled the book The Unholy Silence, because these incidents happened with complete silence, as if a sound deadener was applied somehow.
That makes sense then. Yeah, that really explains the title. It would seem like you'd have heard that with
You definitely would have. The force it would have taken to rip
yeah.
that open, you would have needed a crowbar or a tool or something. Yeah.
Now, yeah, I know you have pictures and audio.
I've shared it in my book. There's pictures of the entity that seemed to plague my daughter. And then a friend of mine, we took a picture during the housewarming party, and there seemed to be an entity swirling around her that didn't show up to the naked eye, but on the camera it did. And back then, of course, it was just digital camera with a little SD card. And the paranormal investigation team that came in, they took the camera to document it and look at it to make sure. And of course, back then, 2008, 2009, there was no real Photoshop or any way I could have done this.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you can do anything. But back then, they looked at it and they decided that this was a class 3 ectoplasmic entity dancing with my friend. And yeah, it was quite harrowing at that time. So the investigation. And before this, I had a friend of mine with a psychic medium come over to the house. And I had never met her before, but when she walked in, she looked right past me as if she couldn't see me. She walked straight to the stairs and proceeded downstairs where the activity was. Now, whether my friends had told her that's where the epicenter is or not, I don't know. But
Yeah.
then downstairs spoke in a child's voice, or the best approximation of one, claiming that the ghost's name was Timmy, a young boy. But Timmy declared that he was not alone in the house, that there were other things that wanted us to leave or they would kill us.
Wow. That's crazy. Now, what was the response when you shared your evidence, like with investigators, or I imagine you have some skeptics?
The paranormal group that came in to investigate, there was 4 of them at the time, 5, I think, with the owner, Marie. So there was 5 of them total. And 2 of the people there were skeptics and 2 were believers. And of course she was. So she had set up a laptop downstairs on a little table. And downstairs, the ceiling was your standard, probably asbestos tile, whatever it was that spongy stuff in department stores. So it was pretty solidly secured in there. But the skeptics were searching the water heater with meters. They had infrared cameras, laser temperature readers, and everything you could imagine, night vision goggles. And they questioned, have you ever felt sick, dizzy, or when you're around your water heater? So they scanned for radon, radiation, everything in the basement, electromagnetic fields, possibly anything that could cause a hallucination. Now, when they came to the house, outside, I met them in the yard and I said, look, these things, they don't give a shit. And on cue, I said, whenever we talk about it, something happens. And when I said that, of course, the lights in my house all flickered like a power shortage. I said,
Uh,
exactly. I couldn't have done it better if I had a remote control clicking it to make it happen. So they went in and I stayed outside and they went downstairs. I went downstairs into my office there and I said, hey, can I just grab my cigarettes real quick before you guys really get going? He's, yeah. And the lights were off. Just the glow of my monitor in my office was the only light in there. And the gent had night vision goggles and a laser temperature. I grabbed my cigarettes. I turned to walk out. He goes, hold it right there. I was like, okay, what? He goes, turn around and look at your chair. My office chair was spinning. And he says, oh, it's 10 degrees colder right there. He says, did you touch that chair? I said, no. So on the last rotation, my daughter's guitar from upstairs in her bedroom appeared in the chair. And then he said, did you put that there? I said, no. Did you? He's, nope. I said, you saw me. I went right in, grabbed my cigarettes. I'm going right back out to smoke. I'm not playing with stuff. He's, nope, that's it. We'll document that. I said, okay, have a good time. This happens to me every day. I'll see you. And I went back upstairs. For me, it was just a normal everyday occurrence. And
yeah.
Marie was documenting this on her laptop and recording electronic voice phenomena. Now, when she did this, a quarter, just a simple 25-cent George Washington headpiece from 1983, dropped onto her laptop in the middle of her keyboard. What the significance is of that, we still don't know. But the EVP, the voices that came after their investigation was complete, were chilling. In fact, when I hear it, it still gives me goosebumps. It is terrifying. It is unholy. It is demonic. And it is threatening. And it's absolutely terrifying. So yeah, there haven't been many skeptics that haven't said this doesn't exist, because when I encounter somebody, everybody has either had an experience they can't explain or they know somebody who has. So I think that the world is full of believers, even those who are too afraid to admit it because they fear the unknown.
Yeah. Now, you, I think you no longer live in the house, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, I've been out
Okay.
of the house for 20 years. Yeah.
Now, have you had encounters since leaving? Did it follow you?
I've had encounters since then. In fact, I continue to have encounters weekly. On TikTok, about 3 weeks ago, I posted a video I caught where I was home alone out in the garage. And it was cold weather, so I set up smoking in the garage. And the doorknob had jiggled and the door had cracked open about this far, as if somebody was peeking through. And then it slammed shut with force. Hello? Anybody here? I live with just my 30-year-old daughter. I thought maybe she'd come home from her boyfriend's house. It was a Saturday morning. Again, the doorknob twists and opens again, slightly lower, slightly more ajar. Hello? Slam shut again. I go in there, look around, nobody's there. I go and grab my EMF meters and run it up and down, and absolutely nothing. And sometimes in paranormal investigations, when things you can see, we just don't have the technology to record it yet. We just don't understand what these things are. So these issues happen probably once a week, every week, all the time. Things happen. And it's at this point, they're not as malevolent or evil as I experienced before. My daughter, as I said, now is almost 30 years old. So I'm not worried about this entity coming back for revenge. But
Yeah.
the things that happen are just more annoying. My girlfriend was pouring popcorn into the stovetop. She likes to make it and shake it, old school, old fashioned way. And holding the popcorn, something smacked it out of her hand and it hit the backsplash with force. It wasn't a slip, it wasn't Butterfingers, it was knocked out of her hand. That same, what we were doing, making popcorn, I reached for the light switch to turn off the light into the pantry, and she witnessed this too. Before my hand even touched the switch, it turned off on its own, flipped down. And I was like, okay, that's what we've got going on. So, yeah, all of the time these things happen. And I'll tell you this story too, and we'll see if it happens to you. I was on an interview with Carol Graves, or no, Carol Hughes, excuse me, on the Grave Talks podcast.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I told her that before I had a girlfriend, when I lived alone, that 4 or 5 bobby pins ended up on my shower floor in a star fashion pattern. No idea where, obviously, I don't use bobby pins. No idea where the bobby pins would have come from. And then I started seeing bobby pins all over the places, at friends' houses, where they didn't use bobby pins. On freshly wiped down counters, they would appear at friends' houses. Even in Reno, Nevada, at the Nugget Hotel and Casino, as we were checking in, there were bobby pins right there by the credit card reader. I told this to Carol Hughes, and later on, she contacted me a couple weeks later, said, "Hey, this is when your episode's going to air. Here's the link to it." She said, "By the way, since you told me this story, I've been seeing bobby pins all over the place where they probably shouldn't be." So we'll see if this happens to you now that I've relayed the story and see if you get bobby pins showing up in strange places. But that
Yeah,
begs,
I'll have to.
is talking about it enough to invoke the paranormal? Is it
Yeah,
transferable? Is it like a contagion? It'll be interesting to see.
yeah. I'll see if I end up seeing any bobby pins. I did one related, kind of off topic a little bit, but one related thing that happened. I interviewed the owner of the Greystone Manor, Heather, from New York, and before her interview, I had went upstairs, and I don't anymore, but I used to put my dogs in their kennels before, and they're upstairs. Well, I walked by the upstairs bathroom, and I saw a full shadow figure. And I don't normally see much in my house, this house we live in. I think there might be something around, but it's not bad. But I saw a full shadow figure. So I went and I thought it was a little weird because I don't normally see that. So I
Right.
went and I did the interview with Heather, and after we were chatting, and I said, I saw a full shadow figure in my bathroom, and I said, my house, as far as I know, is not very haunted. And she was like, oh, it's probably one of mine. So they like to check in on people before I do interviews. I haven't
Nice.
seen the shadow figure since.
Okay. That's good. That is good. Shadow figures, in my experience, are not usually very kind, not helpful. And that's the thing is these things that I dealt with were targeted to break me of my faith. And eventually what happened was they succeeded. And they tried, and it took a year for them to figure out exactly how to target me to get me to separate with the Catholic Church. And it was trial and error. They terrorized the children. My wife had nasty nightmares. My youngest daughter, who was, I believe, 4 at the time, had a terrifying nightmare vision of our little Pomeranian butchered with entrails strewn all over my office. Very descriptive 4-year-old. And
Yeah.
she was told that she was to grab a butcher's knife and kill us. She claims that her Elmo Tickle Me doll was talking to her. And then she said, Dad, do we even have a butcher's knife? I said, don't worry about it. That's not what it's called, but don't worry about it. So she got rid of this Tickle Me Elmo doll. She actually put it outside for the Rottweiler to play with and destroy because he was notorious for destroying toys. He didn't touch it. It stood there for a week before we threw it in the garbage. We just got rid of it. And she didn't shed one tear about it. She hated that doll after that. So things that targeted my children, that was the sweet spot. And I'll tell you, there was an incident with my neighbor. And I didn't think about this, and I've just kept it in my mind for the last 20 years. And then I wrote my book. But my neighbor and I had a great relationship where we would have a beer and a cigarette over the fence, very neighborly. We do it
Yeah.
probably 3 times a week. Sunday afternoon, I went over to the fence. He beckoned me over as he usually does and tossed me a beer, and I popped the cap on it and lit up a cigarette. We're sitting there, and he pulls me closer and he looks at me in the eyes and he says, "Your wife's a slut." What, John? Why would you say that? What is wrong with it? Why would you say that? He looks at me again. "She's a slut." And I'm looking at his eyes for any sign of mockery or joking or the precursor to a joke. And
Yeah.
nothing. He has a sickening, sweet smile on his face. He turns around and walks away. "John." No response. "John." No response, continues to walk. I was like, "John, come back here. Talk to me about this. What the fuck are you talking about?" Ignores
Yeah.
me. The next day, I talk to him. I catch him outside. He's, "Hey, what's going on?" I was like, "Hey, what was that yesterday? What was that all about?" "What are you talking about?" I was like, "When we had beers and a cigarette over the fence, what you said to me." I repeated and told him what he had said. No, I didn't say that. John, you said it. No, I wouldn't say that to you. That no. Are you screwing with me? I was like, no, you said that to me. No, I didn't. Oh, I didn't. I was like, okay, I left it at that. And I searched his face for any type of deception or lie, and he genuinely looked confused. So I believe this was his first attempt by whatever these things were to rattle me, to shake me. He had no
Yeah.
recollection of meeting me at the fence, no recollection of the beer or the cigarette. He didn't recall at all. So I chalked it up to alcoholism. He had too many beers, whatever it was. I chalked it up to that, and I'd forgotten about it until I started writing the book. And I'm like, wait a minute, that was really unusual and so out of character. It didn't happen before, and it never happened since. So that was the first attempt. So we figured out that whatever these things were, they cannot read your mind. If they could, it would have been okay. Here's the plan, execute it day one. We're moving on to the next family to terrorize. But it took them a year to study, to watch, to mimic and mock, to affect our daily lives in such a way. Because if they had gone straight for my children, game over, done,
Yeah.
done deal.
Yeah. When writing the book, you've told me a bunch of the stories, but I imagine a lot of that terror came back up. Was there ever a moment when you were writing it that you considered stopping again?
This last time, no. There was no interference. There was no pause. It came out of me almost as if it was going to explode unless I got it out. So I wrote like a man, forgive the pun here, it's intended, like a man possessed, right? I wrote like a demon, and it all came out and it all flowed out so naturally. And before I finished it, I did check with the witnesses and say, am I remembering this correctly? My notes say that this happened. I remember it that way. Is that what you remember? And they, yeah, absolutely. That's exactly how it happened. So I corroborated with them and I checked my facts. And the book just flowed out of me as if it were begging to be told.
Very nice. Now, what led you, kind of a final question on the house itself,
Yeah.
what kind of led you to moving out of the house?
Here's where it is. So my wife had gone to work and we had a mutual friend, Meg. She had come over to help me plan a Christmas party. Now, keep in mind, by January 5th, I was out of the house. So this was about a month before. And back then, you had to burn CDs and put them in there. I was going to have a party with custom music. So she had brought her best friend, Josie, over to help select music. And they were sitting in the threshold of my office door, between the office door and the little living room area downstairs. And they were going through CDs and checking the music and things. And they were a few years younger than me, about 11 years younger than I was. So they were going through the music. And the people we were going to have over were a great mix of generations. So I wanted to make sure that we didn't just play the oldie shit, that the new stuff was there too. So
Yeah.
my daughter comes home. Now, this is my 12-year-old daughter at the time. She comes home and she comes downstairs. Hey, Dad. Hey, how was your day at school? Good. Meg, but this is Josie. Hi, Josie. Hi. They've introduced each other. My daughter says, I'm going to make some of those Totino's pizzas that you got at Costco. I was like, okay, I don't want one, but maybe Meg or Josie does. And they were like, oh, yeah, pepperoni, combination for me. So she goes back upstairs for about 45 minutes. And about the time that I'm going to go check on her, she comes downstairs with plates in her, tucked in her arm, just like a waitress, very skilled, very proud of her. And the thing to know about this before I proceed is that my kids were good kids. I never had to spank them or discipline them. It was just simply raising my voice slightly would cause tears. And they always used manners, please and thank you. In fact, I got compliments everywhere we went on their manners. My children would never embarrass us or themselves in front of company, especially somebody they had met that day. So my daughter comes down and hands Josie her pizza, hands Meg her pizza, and she has a third one and she starts to walk towards me. And I said, no, Beth, we're good. I don't need one, hon. I just ate. As if she couldn't hear me, she continued to walk towards me. I raised my voice, a little more stern. Hey, I said I was good. I don't need a pizza. She proceeded forward again. She crossed in front of me, laid the pizza diagonally in front of me on my desk. And when she did, I sat and looked at her, and her face was about this far from mine. And she looked at me and smirked, a toothless grin, unnatural, mocking. And when I looked into her eyes, I knew that thing was not my daughter. Every hair on my body stood at attention, goosebumps, and I was paralyzed with fear. And she just stood there looking at me, mocking. Finally, I summoned up all of the energy and courage I had, and I screamed at the top of my lungs. Now, understand that I can yell incredibly loud. I've made grown men cry. And I
Mm.
shook the windows when I yelled, "Get away from me or I'll kill you," as loud as I could. Josie dropped her pizza, put her hands up in a reflexatory action as if she was going to be attacked. The windows rattled and shook. The boom was louder than I had ever produced before. It was supernatural with all of my strength, fear, and anxiety in that one blast. Whatever that thing was, this far from my face, didn't blink. It didn't move. It did not react. She continued to smile, that sickening smile in my face. And then, what seemed like decades, she finally backed away, slowly, keeping eye contact with me, turned towards the door, walked a few feet, turned back towards me, locked eyes, and smirked wider, if that was possible, and then turned around again and walked as if slow motion, walked to the stairs, looked back at me again, smirked one last time, and went upstairs. Josie grabbed her phone to call the police. She said, "I don't know you, but you can't scream at your children like that. That's child abuse." And Meg stopped her. "Whoa, hold on. I know Doug. I know his children. They would never act like that. And if he yelled at them like that, they would be bawling. I've seen them cry for much, much less." I said, "Josie, I'm sorry. I've never met you before, but whatever that thing was, it wasn't my daughter. And I didn't want it to touch me at all costs." Finally, Josie said, "You need to go upstairs and check on her." I said, "I can't. I am terrified. I can't move." Finally, about 15 minutes later, we go upstairs. We find my daughter asleep in her bed. We wake her up. She looks confused, disoriented. She has no recollection of meeting Josie, no recollection what she was doing for 45 minutes while the pizzas were cooking. She has no memory of anything except getting ready to walk home, putting her backpack on at school. That was the last memory she had. And that was it.
Wow.
At that point, I stepped off the battlefield. I was like, okay, checkmate. You got me. I was not willing to sacrifice my daughter to whatever was in the house. So I
Yeah.
stopped praying. I stopped going to church regularly. I stopped making the sign of the cross. I stopped praying to the rosary, and I stopped taking communion. And for that last month I was in the house, the paranormal activity stopped. When I stopped, it stopped. And I look at it as not a win, but I just stepped off the bat. I gave myself permission to step off of the battlefield. Okay, I'm exhausted. I'm not going to fling holy water anymore. I'm not going to continue to fight. Checkmate. You made it very clear what you're capable of. And that terrified me.
Yeah. Wow. That's that. I think that would make me want to leave, to kind of get out of the house.
And I did. It was to the point, but at that time, my marriage had dissolved into arguments and fights, and my wife at the time absent most of the time. So I was left, and eventually I had full custody of the kids after the divorce. I quickly gained full custody as she went off to entertain herself with other men and basically didn't want to see the children. So I ended up taking care of the kids by myself until I had remarried. But at that time, it was left up to me to basically pack the house, move, find another place to go, and vacate the place because I couldn't handle them attacking my kids anymore.
Yeah. So moving on, you founded the Authentic Haunted, which curates and trades cursed and haunted objects. After what you live through, what drives someone to towards that kind of work rather than away from it.
The idea behind it was essentially that, okay, I'm plagued anyway. I have weekly occurrences, if not daily occurrences of supernatural happening. I've got all of these incidents that continue to happen, and I continue to look for reasons. As a paranormal investigator, I don't ghost hunt. I'm trying to find the truth. What are these things? Are they simply the spirits of family members who have passed on as we've thought for generations? Is it energy from a black hole? Are we circling the event horizon? Is it an other dimensional being, or is it a pissed off version of ourselves from another dimension? We just
Yeah.
don't know. We don't know what it is. We could be in the matrix for all we know. But
Yeah.
what caused me to do this was that these artifacts that I encountered by happenstance, I had, and the first thing I had was actually just a little souvenir that the wallpaper was peeling at the Winchester Mansion when I toured it. And I'd put my hand up to rest by the frame of the door and it fell off in my hand. I was like, oh, I'll just hold on to this. After I had tucked that away at the ripe old age of 40 years old, when I got back to Idaho, I had lost my job. I had a heart attack. And I decided, okay, this object is probably cursed. So I tucked it away. So I thought about it when I see on different mediums that people are selling these artifacts claiming to be haunted, haunted dolls, haunted candelabras. I was like, the things that I have are legitimately haunted or cursed. And so I keep a warded chest with these objects here. And people purchase these things. And right now, I've only probably have about 4 or 5 objects. I don't purchase or sell everything under the sun as a living. These things are legitimate. When I go to an investigation, like the Queen Mary, there was a piece of wall that they had cut open to repair a pipe. And they were just throwing the pieces of the original wall into a garbage bag. And I thought that piece is there is over 60 years old. I'm just going to grab this piece of wallboard, this bulkhead, and cut it up and see who wants to buy a piece of the Queen Mary. So it started that way. And it evolved from there. But more than just haunted artifacts and curating and things like that. And I'm very selective about the quality and the items that I buy. But it is a full investigation paranormal business that we do, and we don't charge
Yeah.
exorbitant fees or anything like that. It's just a labor of love. It's just a investigative entity that helps me to try to determine what it was that attacked me so many years ago.
Yeah. Now, have you ever acquired an object that generally frightened you based on what came with it?
I would say, and I didn't keep it for very long, but I had a gentleman from Manhattan who had claimed that he got this from a pawn shop owner, and it was a little creamer, a silver-plated creamer, part of a complete tea set that I didn't get. But he claimed that Danny Lutz from the Amityville Horror had pawned this and had
Oh,
happened to have it from the house. And I put the meter on it. There was nothing there, but it was creepy enough that I didn't want to hold on to it for very long. And again, I have a warded chest that whether that keeps the entities at bay or whatever, but I put it in there for a few weeks and it sold rather quickly.
yeah.
I would say that would probably be one of the most haunted artifacts that I've had. But even right now, the wallpaper piece that I have, I can put the wall, and I don't touch these things with my bare hands anymore, by the way. I use forceps and gloves because I learned my lesson. But sometimes just a simple piece of wood that I picked up from the haunted bridge here will spike the meter, or the wallpaper will usually always spike that meter. So those items there are pretty active. And
Yeah.
when I do sell them, I have a disclaimer that I don't claim that this will produce any type of supernatural effect for you. I don't claim that it's going to cure any diseases or help you with anything. It's simply something that you can have as a artifact, and I can verify the authenticity of it, but not the paranormal aspect.
Yeah. Now, you did mention the Queen Mary and the Winchester Mystery House. Now, when you went there, what did your investigations reveal that kind of surprised you?
It was interesting. So I would say the Queen Mary There was an incident. So it was St. Patrick's Day 2020. COVID had just become rampant and nobody knew. Everybody was afraid it was airborne and just in the air and you were going to catch it if you stepped outside. So we went, me and just my immediate family, went to the Queen Mary, and we were the only people there on St. Patrick's Day. The entire ship was deserted except for us. And the ticket taker at the front said, "Do you want a guided tour or would you like to go on your own?" I'd love to go on my own. So we did that, and I investigated, and I've got some video. The haunted cabin, the haunted cabin, didn't have a plaque on the door. It had been removed. I inquired about it later, and they told me that so many people just pry it off with a pocket knife or a screwdriver and take it. So they stopped labeling that room. And now they sell the plaques at the gift shop. You can purchase them for
Huh?
10.99. So they have reproduction. That's quite, I have one. It's great. But when I was there, I had to use the restroom. And I was in the stall using the facilities. The faucet had come on. All of there was four faucets lined up, and they had turned on. The water had turned on, and of course, I heard no door open, no footfalls, nothing. I finished my business quickly and went out there, and all of the faucets were running. And for some reason, my mind tried to find a scientific reason for it. And I was thinking, oh, damn kids. But then I quickly realized there are no kids. I'm the only one on board. So I turned the faucet off and went and reported back, hey, this is happening here. And they were like, oh, we read about that in the pamphlet. It says that the little haunted kids like to turn the water on. That was something that really surprised me there. Also, the isolation ward was very creepy. A sheet of plexiglass in this room that was completely aft at the very far end of the ship. And it had a placard next to it with all of the names of the deceased who died on the voyage. And the
Oh,
isolation room was for tuberculosis or cholera or whatever it was in the 40s that took people's lives. And it looked more like a prison jail cell than a isolation hospital. Bunk beds were lined up, one sink, one toilet without any privacy. It was rather, and you couldn't go into it. You couldn't actually do it. It was sealed off, but it was rather unsettling to see that. And directly across from that is where I obtained the piece of wallboard from the Queen Mary. But that was a
yeah.
surprising incident there. The
Yeah.
Winchester Mystery House didn't reveal anything. It was almost sterile, almost neutral. I didn't have any experiences. No meters went off. There was no paranormal activity, even though the design of the house is bizarre and is purportedly one of the most haunted locations in the world. The day that I went, there was nothing there.
Yeah. I think recently, who was it? I think Haunted Nights, I think, went and investigated there. If I remember right, I haven't got to watch the video, but if
I
I
saw the
remember
post
right.
online. Yeah, very exciting stuff.
Yeah. Now, can you tell us a little bit about the Unholy podcast?
Yeah.
What you cover, and for anyone that doesn't know?
Absolutely. So, the Unholy Podcast is a weekly podcast series that I host, produce, edit, create, much like yours, where I put it up there and I share my story as well as other stories from other paranormal investigators. And each week we investigate and we try to see what commonalities we have when it comes to the paranormal and see if we can document or substantiate or classify what these things are. And it's a purely investigative show where we talk with others who have had these experiences, people who've had portals or haunting experiences or the Annabelle doll turn its head to them, things like that. Anything paranormal, supernatural in nature is a great topic for the Unholy Podcast.
Okay. And then what is next for you, paranormal project wise?
I've got two books coming out before Christmas, part of the Unholy series, which is Beyond the Unholy. That's going to be the first one. And this documents the events after the Unholy Silence, the continued and sustained paranormal hauntings, and all of the things that I've experienced since then. So it's going to be a detailed book about those things that stayed with me. And to this date, I still haven't encountered anything as malevolent or as evil, but it's ever present. So that is the next book. And then after that, there's going to be the book, The Unholy Protocol, which is going to be more of a field guide for paranormal researchers that classify entities to the best of our scientific knowledge, do's and don'ts of paranormal investigating. And obviously, there's going to be some stories thrown in there as well. So that's next. And then always, I'm working on The Unholy Silence for a TV media adaptation, either a limited 8-part series or a 2-hour full length feature film. So
Oh, very nice.
those are what I'm doing right now, pushing that envelope.
Now, for anyone that's looking to purchase your book, The Holy Silence, or find you, where can they find you? Where can they buy your book?
Absolutely. So you can always find me at authordougowen.com. That's the main home for all of the unholy. And you can find the book on Amazon, Lulu, Google. It's international on Lulu, it's everywhere, Europe. Pretty much anywhere you find books. I believe it's published in 140 different countries. So anywhere that you wanted to obtain the book, you can find it. And you can always visit the website to find a link to purchase it as well.
Okay. A huge thank you, Doug, for coming on and sharing your story that took 20 years to write. And for everyone out there, remember, history truly never dies. It just finds new ways to haunt us. The links to how where you can find Doug and his book and everything, his podcast will be in the description below. If tonight's conversation, if you enjoyed this, please leave a comment, subscribe, and hit that bell, ring the bell there. And until next time, keep digging into the darkness.